Hello, Internet. Gino, that Pinguino Grieco here again with another episode of Deep Listens, your bi-weekly video game book club that also has episodes on the weeks that we're not having the book club sort of thing, where we fill it in with kind of odd, random stuff. Welcome. Today we are going to be talking about Grim Fandango. Nope, not Grim Fandango. Sorry, different game that also has a similar theme. We're going to be talking about Flipping Death. And I'm going to be joined in our Flipping Death discussion by Billy the Sleep Hacker Rothert.
Wait, where'd you come up with that? Because I just read about about hacker sleep schedule. Is that a theme in this game?
Someone's
it's a character.
Yeah, there's a character.
Yeah, okay. I just totally separate from this. I just read an article about how early risers are not going to be in prominence anymore as far as sleep schedules are concerned. And for some reason, I thought you had hacked into my mind and was mind reading me.
Yes.
On what I had recently read.
That would also be thematically appropriate for this game, but no, that was not what I was going for.
Yeah.
Though, if you want a nice life hack for sleeping pills. Life hack. And that other voice, that laughter you hear, is Peter the Slim Reaper Busby.
What's going on, everybody? Way better nickname than the stupid servant a Durant gave himself, and I'm still salty about it. But neither here nor there. This is not one of our incredibly popular NBA one-off podcasts. What's going on, everybody? Excited to talk about Flipping Death. Today's animal fact. This one was shared with me by somebody else, but it was so good I had to pass it along. So snakes, yes. Specifically pythons, specifically the Burmese python, right? So when they eat, they only eat every once in a while, but they eat a huge meal. But really cool things happen. So when they eat, they get this sudden inrush of sugars, fats, proteins, all this stuff. So their metabolism will speed up nearly 40 times more. And even more impressively, its organs double in size. And its heart expands by 40%. So it can pump this sort of its blood becomes almost milky. And it can pump it through its body with these larger organs and enlarged heart.
Wow.
So, a lot of people are studying Burmese pythons in the hope that, America, in its current obesity crisis, can, grow snake hearts.
So we can engorge in the way that they do?
Yeah, pretty much.
They literally hulk up every time they eat, and then they go back to banner when they're lying, dormant.
Yeah, their hearts grow 40%, their organs double, and they just pump this milky blood throughout their body until things sort of calm down a little bit.
One, there's got to be an anime named Milky Blood, and two, they're literal Grinches.
Yeah, yeah.
What I'm kind of concerned with is that our approach to American obesity is that we need to somehow genetically modify humans so that they can just gorge themselves on food, but then process it better as opposed to just not gorging ourselves on food and having healthy lifestyles.
Well, this is how we got into, the climate change issue, too. It's we could change what we do, but, science will figure it out.
Yep.
It's techno-utopianism.
See, this is why I'm investing prominently in waterfront real estate, but I build in the water.
All right. I'm getting in on Bitcoin now. I think it's going to come back.
Here it comes. I'm buying up all of these GPUs. I'm going to get all this Bitcoin. It's going to be great.
Yep.
All you need to do is steal electricity and then profit.
Yeah, and you got it. Step 1, step 2, profit.
So, we have emails. We have feedback. And if you would like to be someone who sends feedback or emails, go ahead at DeepListensPod on Twitter or deeplistens.libsyn.com. Our comment sections are not working, and I'm working on it. But hey, check out. Maybe it'll work for you. We'll see. Or the thing that always works, deeplistenspodcast@gmail.com. It turns out it's easiest to email an email. Who'd have thunk it? So, we've got 2 emails coming in hot. First one comes in from longtime listener, multi-time emailer, Will Atwood.
Woo!
This comes from Will Atwood. Hey, Deep Listens crew, after listening to the Gungeon episode, I have one question. What is the toughest animal in a zoo that you could realistically survive an attack from? Billy, don't say chimp. Also,
Question.
I would like to submit a formal request that you can do a Castlevania Symphony of the Night episode featuring the Granimal. The fans have spoken. We deserve this. Sincerely, XXX. So this is intercap. So little x, big X, little x. 420 Blaze 69 XXX. Thank you.
That sounds about right.
Were the last 3 X's alternating caps as well?
Of course they were.
Gotta have it.
He's Lee.
Right. Just making sure.
That's so that people know that his guild is swole. It's real good. So, let's just answer the second part first, because I feel like the first part will have more discussion. Our next podcast, for those who are listening, will be Castlevania Symphony of the Night, and we are extending an invitation to the Granimal. We are
I think
liaisoning.
Would be more accurate, really.
We are issuing a challenge. You won't come on this podcast. You won't.
Scared.
Okay, so that's answered. You're getting what we're playing next early this time. But second, what is the toughest animal in the zoo that you could survive an attack from? So you are getting attacked in this case.
Well, hang on. The question changed, okay? Survive an attack or win the fight?
No, this is survive.
Survive them attacking me?
Yes,
All right.
this is surviving an attack.
But so they're initiating the confrontation. Like, I can't sneak up on it?
No, you are not sneaking up on this chimp and putting it in a sleeper hold.
Gotcha.
It is coming at you.
Are we getting surprised, or are they just running up on us? Like it's an open field and they're running at us? You know?
I think, like, in the octagon, they drop both of us in.
Right. And we just have to make it out alive?
Yeah, I
like
think
survive 3 rounds? Like, even if we lose on the scorecard, we don't get murdered.
Yeah, this is survive. This is not best the animal. This is walk away.
Okay.
And I'm assuming that this does not mean that the animal actually, in fact, made contact. Like, you are on even footing. And
right. It's not like he has a hold on my leg and we're going from there.
Yeah, it's not like the tiger got your neck.
Right.
And you walk away because you're just too hard.
I refuse to tap. I think probably crocodile or like alligator, because like weirdly enough, the muscles that open their jaws are very weak. So like, provided I could get a hand on it, like if I could hold its jaw shut, I'd be okay.
Sure.
So like, I don't think I'd win every time, but I think that's the most badass animal that like I'd be like, okay, I'm not instant death.
Yeah, and I think they're pretty bursty with their speed. So if you can just like evade them for a few seconds, you'd be fine.
Yeah, they don't have good change of direction.
Yeah. Billy, what do you think?
Well, if I can't say chimp,
You can't.
I would say chimp if the email specifically said Billy can't say chimp.
It says Billy don't say chimp. It doesn't say can't. You can say chimp. You'd just be lying.
I'm just for the interest of this being more more creative, I won't say chimp, but I'm gonna just say chimp's getting a nod.
You see the chimp, you recognize it, and you think it's weak.
I would say maybe some kind of like at the zoo?
Yeah, zoo animal.
Badass animal that I think I could survive a fight against. I would say I just don't go to the zoo that much. Like, what kind of animals are at the zoo?
Lions, tigers, bears.
Probably some sort of like antelope or something you could do.
Yeah, like I was thinking like I could probably take a horse,
Like a zebra?
Yeah.
Zebra maybe. Like a full-grown Clydesdale would be tough.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the horse's attack opportunities on me are very linear.
Now remember, they are very fast and they're
Yeah,
very
they are.
tramply.
They are very tramply, but like I have perpendicular to aid me there. Horse.
What would your attack point be on a horse though? Like,
Just punch it in the neck.
I would be aiming for the legs a lot. I'd be going for the knees constantly with side kicks.
Yeah, that's true. If you break a horse's leg, it's done forever. So,
But then again, hold on. I'm thinking about winning the fight, not just like walking away. I think maybe like a black bear. I could probably like
you could not take a black bear.
I didn't say take.
black bear.
We didn't say black bear. We said
Survive
walk
an
away.
attack. Yeah.
We said walk away. I'm gonna say black bear.
240 pounds, man. That's a big bear.
I've fought bigger dudes.
But in the realm of bears, it's a little bear.
Yeah, it's a small, like, relative to other bears, it's small.
I'm thinking like domesticated black bear. You know,
Yeah.
I could probably walk away now. If this were like a 3-round fight, I'd probably lose all 3 rounds.
Yes.
But I think I'd go home to my family that night.
Okay.
Right.
That's fair. Man, I don't know. I'm pretty soft when it comes to fighting animals. I like
but
animals
you have
a
lot. You have a lot of shoulders, Gino. And if it was, you know,
Yeah, you got like 4 or 5 shoulders, man.
If you had to walk away from this animal to get back to see Jen, what animal do you think, like the toughest animal you could get through to get back to your loving wife?
Fuck. Like a swan?
So just looking at that list of animals in the St. Louis Zoo, there are termites, there are grasshoppers, a lot of bugs you could probably deal with.
I could kick the shit out of some bugs.
Yeah,
How
man.
about like a giant tortoise?
I mean, I think I could outrun it. I'd survive that encounter. But I feel like you're discounting the swan as not that threatening. Have you ever seen a swan that's pissed?
I wouldn't go near a swan. I wouldn't go near a horse either, though. I don't trust horses.
Yeah, I feel like I actually knew someone who had his arm broken by a swan.
Yeah, man.
Swans don't fuck around. They got big, muscly wings. Their neck's all crazy. It's just muscle. They're like a snake attached to a bird.
I don't think that's how this works, man.
I think I could take a cheetah. They're tiny, they're light.
Yeah, they are. They're pretty light.
Yeah.
I think you could probably survive an encounter with a cheetah.
Yeah, I
as
think
long as
they
they
also-
don't get the beat on you, I think you're fine.
Yeah, right. Like if they don't have enough like a run up.
They'll get exhausted really fast. So you'd probably come back real cut up, but I don't think you'd be dead.
I think they'd kill me.
Yeah, I think I could take a swan.
It shocks me how few of these animals I recognize on the list of the St. Louis Zoo's animals.
I think I just have a level of respect for animals and their ferocity that I just don't want to fuck with any of them. And I think a good shot to the head of a swan would probably down it.
Yeah.
I think I'm capable of that. I think I could kick a swan in the head.
You know what I really want to fight? Like an emperor penguin. You know?
You motherfucker, don't you dare.
We're kind of like
Oh,
we're kind of like the same build, you know? Like
The same
they're
build?
they're about 6 feet, kind of stocky. Me too, you know?
they're kind of shaped like a heavy bag too.
Yeah. Like they're
laid
basically
in your
already a punching
style.
bag.
It'd be fun. Like I feel like it'd be
They're-
fun to kick. As sad as that is to say.
They're great dads. You consider yourself a dad?
I have no children.
But-
I would consider myself, you know, a fatherly figure to many
fatherly
of the
figure.
children that come through my life.
They're
Spiritual
excellent
dad.
dads. Well, so we've got black bear, cheetah, or crocodile, and swan.
Follow-up question: What animal would you throw a fight against at
Just
the
like
zoo?
you can have this.
Yeah.
Animal.
For me, hands down, otters.
Yeah.
I would definitely lose a fight against like a flock of otters. I don't even know if you call it like a little pack, like a hydro pack.
Call 'em a flock.
A murder of otters.
I would happily get murdered by.
It's
some
probably
otters.
like a jubilee or something, like
Yeah.
a party of otters,
A club of otters.
a celebration of otters.
Pete, what animal would you
oh,
throw a fight against?
hold on. The group name for otters is Romp or Bevy
Romp
Or-
is good.
or
A romp of
Raft.
otters. Raft makes sense.
There's no way I could never fight a manatee. I just love manatees too much.
Yeah, we
If
did see
every
that
other-
manatee.
If every other animal in the world had to go extinct to save the manatees, I would do it.
You know, they are the gentle giants.
They're the best.
How do you feel about the eternal struggle between the manatee and the dugong?
Fucking dugongs. Don't get me started on dugongs.
That's fair. Penguin, duh. Penguin or kiwi. They're just so cute. Like, where are their wings? They're supposed to be birds.
Dugong. Okay. I'm looking at some now. They're all right. They're no
Dugongs
matter.
are-
They're too skinny to be like as cute, but they're legit.
Yeah, they're like manatee. They're the manatees of Australia, and they
Yeah.
have, or Asia at least, and I think they have a fin.
Uh,
Oh no, their
not
tail
like-
looks different. Their tail
they're
looks
basically
different.
skinny manatees,
Yeah.
but like they have slightly different faces too. They're cute though. I take
Also-
back the things I said about them.
Also the laziest Pokemon name.
True. They did spell it differently, at least.
Oh, they did? I didn't even notice that.
I think so.
So second email.
It's DEW instead of DU, but it's basically the same.
Second email. This comes from Zombie Pie, who sends an email this time instead of a carrier pigeon or some kind of note. Dear Deep Listens, Cat Panions. Fuck. I'm not going to belabor this point and ask you not to respond, but Billy said not every culture deserves representation. I'd rather paraphrase that than put words in his mouth, but man, who would have guessed Billy enjoys gently caressing summer gourds in the Walmart fresh produce section. Regardless, I just have to posit how one can know if a culture deserves representation unless you open the proverbial game industry box. That's right, motherfuckers. I can be deeply philosophical, too. Look at me using Schrodinger's cat to throw the debate back at my opponent. Boom goes the dynamite. Some would call this act the most played-out debate tactic, but I say, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. As Master P, one of the world's most famous poets, once said, make him say, na-na-na-na. Now, to the real purpose of this email.
That wasn't the real purpose of the email?
No.
That seemed like enough, but okay.
No, I've been contemplating about my eventual return to the Deep Listens podcast and came to a startling realization. Few of the games I truly love would make for good podcast discussion material. Now, before Gino slanders my name, I'm not talking about the anime garbage I enjoy wolfing down like dollar menu burritos from Taco Bell. Those types of games are how you land on the podcast, pay dirt. However, I love 4X and RTS games. Unfortunately, these games do not lend themselves to interesting debate topics. I love Stellaris, and Gino knows I play Stellaris on a role-playing server, but 90% of that game involves looking at charts and clicking squares to build stuff. Sid Meier's Civilization is my favorite video game series, but you can only talk about being a brutal warlord or peaceful utopian for so long before your discussion becomes circular. So my question is simple. Are there any games you love or enjoy playing that you suspect will never appear on a Deep Listens podcast?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, I love the Fire Emblem series. I don't think that's ever going to come up. I mean, what do you really say about something like that? Like, oh, barbarians are pretty cool. Yeah, totally.
I mean, I would play Fire Emblem. That'd be fine.
Yeah, what would you say about it?
Yo, this person, I put them in a squad with this person, and they wanted to fuck.
And they totally did.
And they did. And then it was just like high school.
When this male character and female character enter into mounted combat.
Nice.
So yeah, I think we can make that happen.
Maybe.
Game that I think I play a lot that would not be a Deep Listens game. Probably a Legend of Zelda game. Not because those games aren't good, but like I don't think there's philosophical or like cultural context beyond more than just one Legend of Zelda game. Like, I guess we could pick, like, the one that's most influential, but that would just be fodder for people to just yell at us about why that wasn't the most influential one, when all we really wanted to talk about was, like, what makes a Zelda game and why it was influential in our culture.
I still want to play Ocarina of Time on this show at some point, so I think we will get that at some point.
Yeah.
So a series that I enjoy that has not been on this podcast and probably won't be.
DDR, maybe?
I think you could definitely do DDR, but I think it would have to be a bigger thing where we play multiple games and like the music has to come in as a part of it.
Yeah.
I just have a pretty I think that this podcast covers a lot of different stuff, and we have angles on different games. It just really depends on what kind of tact we're going to take on it. Some games just require more, ground laying than others. So I don't think there's any game that I would I would play frequently that we would not have on the podcast. I guess the only examples might be like really long JRPGs that you guys just would not enjoy, and so I wouldn't ask you to play them.
Mm-hmm. Now, I just want to respond for 1 second at ZP and say I've never stroked a gourd.
So if someone can just
I think he mentioned that.
If someone can isolate that sound and remove the never and just I've stroked a gourd, just get that sound clip, that'd be great.
Yeah, fortunately, as I'm the sole editor of this podcast, I think I hold that. I can probably find a way to make that impossible to do.
I'm sure one day there'll be a Deep Listen soundboard somewhere.
Yeah, somebody's going to just say, wow, these guys are just fire. But like more than their great content, they just are a gold mine of sound clips. And they'll spend hour after hour just like pouring through all of our episodes, repeating each minute over and over again until they get the perfect mix of just sound bites. Wow.
The fidelity of this voice is perfect. I need it.
You just got to get real close up on the mic.
Oh, no. Stop.
And just,
Time to talk about Flipping Death. Thank you for your emails. So, Billy, what's Flipping Death?
All right, cool. So I would describe Flipping Death as sort of a mix between a point-and-click adventure and like an action platforming kind of game, because it definitely has elements of both, and like puzzle elements as well as far as its genre and what this game mechanically is all about. The story follows a young woman named Penny who, as she's presented in the very Penny Dowood, presented in the very beginning scenes of the game, is a young woman working at a couple different jobs here and there, but not really finding her best fit in the professional world. Has some boyfriend who's cool enough, I guess, but her interests lie in sort of like offbeat styles and a little bit of the macabre aesthetic. And she, at some point, very early in the game, goes on like goes on a car ride, visits a graveyard. And says, what would be sweet is if I just jumped into this mausoleum for like a hot minute, and then, oh no, it falls through the ground and her spine cracks and she, essentially dies. Well, she goes to the underworld, or the afterlife, and bumps into Death, him, her, or itself, whatever.
He's a skeleton.
Yeah, skeleton creature. Bumps into they-self, and Death says, "Oh, you must be the temp I requested. Finally, I can go take a vacation." Death decides to take a quick vacay to the moon. As it is said, that's where no one's died yet, so there's no souls to manage on the moon.
Sure.
Guess that checks out. Well, Penny is then left with the task of sorting out all the dead and their problems. So Penny then embarks on a journey, meeting lots of spirits with unfinished business, and she gains a unique ability through the Reaper Scythe that Death lends her as he goes on goes on vacation. And she gains the ability to sort of possess people's minds in the mortal world and use their bodies and talents to solve problems for the undead in the afterlife to help those spirits move on and find peace. I think that's pretty much it. Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Mm-hmm.
That is about it. So this game comes from Zoink, from the makers of Stick It to the Man, which is another game I enjoyed very much. And the games have a similar conceit. Penny, you have this kind of weird floaty jump. The art style is kind of 2D, almost cutout, like cardboard cutouts. And you're side-scrolling, side to side.
Think like Paper Mario. Like, as your character turns left or right, they just temporarily, like, become flat. Or, like, you see, like, them as a flat figure.
Yeah. And the main way that you interact with this game is there's the platforming sections. You also collect souls of little critters, little animal critters. And you use those to possess the living.
Yep,
and,
to flip death.
Yes. You flip it and reverse it. And you're largely playing out of this one town. Do you remember what the name of the town is? Something Falls.
I don't.
I don't remember the name of it either.
I'll look it up.
It's a relatively new game, so like the wiki, there's not like a wiki of this game yet. At least I don't think so.
But the whole game takes place in one town, basically.
Right. You get
Flatwood Peaks.
Flatwood Peaks. You get different access to new parts of the town as you progress further and further in the game. Not unlike a Metroidvania game, but it doesn't really work the same kind of way. It's like once you finish a narrative beat, other parts of the town open up, as opposed to you gain some kind of ability or skill or key that unlocks a huge other part of the world.
Yeah, and sometimes you get access to specific items, or you change the environment in ways that allows you to traverse different sections of the world. But largely you are running into issues where things are not where they're supposed to be, ghosts have unresolved issues, and you have to possess the living to finish the problems that the ghosts had. So the very first problem you encounter is a woman who was murdered on the day of her wedding, and she wants you to find her killer. And I think this was the demo that they played at PAX East, and it's what hooked me and made me want to try this game. And I think that's probably one of the only sections of the game where you're just solving someone's problem to solve someone's problem. After the first chapter, there's a larger narrative that you get thrust into, but I did enjoy solving the murder of the old lady.
I'll definitely agree with you. I did have one thought during the game, though, and it was that, like, the uniqueness or sort of the interestingness of the puzzles is inversely proportional to their ability to be solved. So, like, the more sort of, like, humorous and outlandish the puzzle is, the more interesting it is. But that also means the harder it is to be solved. So, like, if the answer to the puzzle had just been like, oh, take this guy to the police station and have him confess, since you can possess his body, that's a dumb puzzle. But, like, if the puzzle solution is, oh, lick this blue paint and then use his tongue to paint this boat, that's an interesting puzzle, but it's now much more difficult to be solved.
Yeah. There's that. There are definitely times when there are multiple storylines kind of happening at once in every chapter. You'll find a ghost who needs you to solve a problem. You'll find, like, one large task that needs to be solved, and then you might run into someone in the land of the living who is talking about something that seems important. And each of these different storylines seems independent, but eventually they will all collide in some way, because there is ultimately, like, one gate that stops you to progressing to the next level. And there were plenty of times when I felt like I was in one of the storylines and, was advancing them, trying to find the solution, and then I was just stuck. And the actual solution was to solve one of the other problems, and it would just provide me the solution to the other one, even though they didn't seem logically linked in any way. And that was something that I would sometimes run into issues with. It's a real adventure game sort of problem, where you're just like, no, just do it. Just do the thing. Hey, I'm possessing the cop. I know this guy's the murderer. Cop, arrest him. And it's like, no. You can't just walk the cop over to the murderer. You need to have
ridiculous.
the murderer.
Why would you do that?
Yeah, you have to have the murderer lick the hand of the woman he murdered. And you can't have, like, at one point in the first level, the dude who murdered this woman is marrying another woman because he just keeps marrying women and murdering them for their money. And his mom is basically in the attic of their house, and she has a gun, and she'll shoot anyone who gets near her house. And she says, the only people I'll let in are my son and, I guess, his new wife. And so I possessed his new wife and drove over there figuring, oh, maybe I can get the new wife to find the body, and then she'll figure it out, and that's an alternate solution. But no, she tries to shoot the new wife too.
Liar.
Yeah. So there were a couple of times when it seemed like there were potentially alternate solutions, and no. The game just said no.
I will say that despite these, like, sometimes parallel storylines that happen, I didn't really find a spot in the game where I felt like I was super stuck, and it's mostly because your primary way of interacting with the mortal world is by possessing one person, and they have movement and, like, one interaction skill. Yeah. Every person that you can possess kind of has, like, a movement type thing, and then, like, a way to interact, whether it's, holding an ice cream cone or blowing a whistle or tooting a trumpet or licking stuff. Every person has, like, their one thing. And just by possessing every person level and just doing their thing around town a little bit, you'll, like, 95% of the time just advance whatever needs to be advanced in that time. And you can oftentimes do the puzzle out of order, and it's okay.
Yeah, you can usually do things out of order. The only times I ran into trouble were where I tried to finish one specific line before moving on to the next thing, and it turned out that halfway through the storyline of one of the problems, I actually needed another solution first. Like, I remember there was a section where there was a character whose hat was on fire, and so there was a fireman who has a heart problem, who's watching a scary movie, and there's a little girl who wants to, I think, get some gum.
Yeah, she likes to chew.
She likes to chew, and she wants bubble gum. And these seem unrelated. And ultimately what you needed to do was get the girl bubble gum, and then using the bubble gum, you needed to fly into a chimney where there was a Santa who died. And you need to fall through the chimney as the little girl because she's attracted to Santa. And then she will become covered in soot and will scream for some reason. And that causes her to look exactly like a character from a scary movie that the firefighter's watching. And so then you can have the little girl kill the firefighter, basically, by scaring him to death. Mm-hmm. But at first, it seemed like two completely separate plot lines. And it turns out that I needed both of them to be in kind of a specific state to advance the plot. So it came up very infrequently, but those few times it did come up, I just felt like I had the answer, and the game just didn't accept it.
Right,
but that's what with adventure games.
Yeah, right. That's what I'm saying. It's like in retrospect, it makes the game much more interesting and like vivid. If the answer just been like, "Oh, I have this bread, I need to make toast. Well, I should put it in the toaster." Like that makes more sense going forward, but it makes it much less interesting looking backward from the end.
Yeah. So of the kind of zany characters that you run into in this game, which ones stood out to you the most? Like, which ones did you appreciate the most?
I mean, only one option here is Pokeman.
I was going to say I'd fight anyone who didn't say Pokeman.
Yeah, right.
Can you describe Pokeman?
Go for it, Pete.
Yeah, Pokeman's, I guess he's a villain, right? He's sort of like a cut-rate supervillain who he's overcome with this overwhelming desire to poke as the most annoying form of human interaction there is. And he just goes around, and it's really a huge waste because apparently his limbs stretch. Apparently he's basically, Mr. Fantastic, but all he uses this power for is to poke people who are increasingly far away.
Yep.
Also, just a cool mechanic of Pokeman is while he's in poke animation, he doesn't descend. So he could you can just mash the poke button, and you're just jamming his arm in all different directions, but he's floating in fucking air.
I did not notice that. But I did notice that Pokeman's poke animation is, I think, the most forceful thing in the game that I could tell.
Yeah.
So if you poke any objects, they just go flying. And I used that to advance at a few spots where I had to move the thing.
That would have been much easier for one part of the game.
Yeah, moving stuff's kind of a pain.
Yeah, that is definitely an issue.
If I did not say Pokeman, it would have been the Lumberjack. I really liked the Lumberjack's dialogue when you were running around with him, because when you first meet the Lumberjack, he's just chilling doing Lumberjack stuff, but he has an axe. And if you take control of him and you just run around the city, he's like, watch out, I don't know what I'm doing, this is really unsafe. And he's just like yelling with an axe that's swinging around his head.
I do like Ghost Quixote, too.
Oh, yeah. Like Don Quixote?
Yeah, you have Don Quixote, and it's Pancho Villa, right, is the squire's name?
I don't remember. They just called him the Squire. I wasn't sure of his name. I didn't get all the ghost cards.
I'll confirm it, but I'm pretty sure it's Pancho Villa is the name of the guy from the story.
Yeah.
That's not the right name.
I also liked the trumpet player. I think was named Miles, almost certainly after Miles Davis.
Yep.
But that's it's because
Don Pancho Villa. Sorry to interrupt.
Okay, it's fine. The trumpet player, the trumpet player is used to get people to follow him when you are playing music. You can get people to follow you to certain directions in sort of like a musical Pied Piper sort of way. But also you use his trumpet to blow air into a whale to blow stuff around through its blowhole. It's crazy. But when you're doing his world interaction, you have to be pressing the button to make the breath from your mouth and also aiming the joystick or whatever your directional option is that you're using for your controls. But the thing is, if you're doing all that, it sounds great. It sounds like trumpet. And if you're pushing one of the buttons and you're not holding the trumpet to your face, he just goes like he is trying to play the trumpet, but it's not up to his mouth, so it's not doing anything.
Yeah, there's a lot of pretty good interactions like that. I really like Dr. Brahm, the psychiatrist.
Yeah, with the puppet.
With the puppet. So he is a returning character from Stick It to the Man. He had a much more prominent role in that game as a fraudulent psychiatrist. But in this game, he's got the power to solve all mental problems with other characters. And all mental problems, I mean, he can put a guy to sleep, and then he can cheer someone up who's got depression. And that's it. That's all he does. But I like him. I like the ghost with the gigantic tennis arm.
Oh, yeah, who hits the bowling balls?
So there's a ghost who was a great tennis player. He was a tennis-playing pirate, I think. And he's sad that his descendant is bad at tennis. And so you have to help him get better at tennis. At first, by trying to have him practice hitting bowling balls with a tennis racket, which is how his ancestor did it. But doing that causes the younger guy to lose an arm. They just say, yeah, this arm's no good. We gotta take this off. We need a donor arm. And so you dig up the arm of the old pirate and have it attached to him, and then he's got a super-powered arm.
That's wild. I think my last character that I liked, not because of what the character did, but because the voice actor was Priscilla and Lady, what was her name? Lady Elderdoe. Because Karen Kaler, I think that's her name, voices that character, and she's just been in like everything. She was in Battle Right as Eva as well.
Oh, okay.
I think we played Battle Right, yeah?
Yeah, she does old lady voices.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah, I also like the crab. You never need the crab. Like, you occasionally will need the crab to just, like, walk places. He doesn't do that much. But he's just under the water, and every character you can possess them, and then they have abilities, but you can also read their minds and kind of talk to them.
Mm-hmm.
And I did that with every character. And the crab is just so excited to have someone controlling his body.
He's just lonely.
He's just so lonely. He's just, I'm at the bottom of the ocean, so if you want to possess my body, whatever. Want to talk? And when you make him walk around, he's just like, I love going places with friends.
Question. What character do you wish were just not in this game?
The ice cream dude. He's in, like, every level, and he never does anything. And he only ever says the same things when you read his mind. It's about ice cream.
So I'm going to think about the answer to that question, but unrelated question. Does Robot Elvis ever do anything?
You can't possess Robot Elvis.
You can, okay.
Robot Elvis is just Robot Elvis.
All right.
He says, hubba hubba, baby.
Well, okay. Yeah, I'm fine with him.
I could just have, like, not ever interacted with, like, the seagull ever.
Yeah.
And been totally fine.
Yeah, that was a little lowbrow.
I mean, I'm fine with a little bit of lowbrow humor, like a poop joke now and there. Like, now and then, totally fine. But, like, after the 15th time I had to, like, poop on something to get an achievement, I was just like, I really wish I wasn't doing this, but there's an achievement at the end of this, so I'm going to poop on this child as a bird.
I wasn't crazy about the aliens either.
Mm.
You have to, you possess these aliens and you end up, tractor beaming cows as one does.
Yep.
But yeah, they didn't do much for me.
And I liked, there are a lot of just one-off characters who are, I think, pretty solid. I like the recurring characters and seeing how they adapt and change over time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
like
those
cop
are great.
Who's incompetent, and then it turns out he's a sleep hacker. Like, you get a lot of variety out of the core cast. There's that mermaid. You meet Captain Nemo.
You do.
The core cast is pretty solid.
So the main thrust of the story is that Penny is basically, she's dead, but where she died was near this skull that has a piece of Death's scythe embedded in it. And this causes it to have powers and properties similar to her own powers, which causes her body to be possessed by a ghost. And it's running around trying to assemble this skeleton that she's carrying around, the skeleton that matches the skull that she's carrying around. And to figure out where this is all coming in, you get a bit of flashback. You meet a blacksmith who basically tells you the story of what happened to Death's Scythe, where did this skull come from? What did you guys think of the dual narratives, like in the past and the present? You kind of see this town in the past and the present, and it's all the same. It's like descendants of, or I guess ancestors of, the main characters from the current time.
So, I didn't really, I don't want to put this, it didn't really do much for me in general. I did like sort of how they were using the flashback conceit as a way, like, in Assassin's Creed, when you like screwed up and it'd be like, oh, time desynchronization, and like that was basically their excuse for death. Here, it's like more of a storytelling mechanic where they're just like, no, Penny, that's not the way it happened, as if they're just reciting things to her and she's sort of interrupting with these different guesses. I thought that was funny, just that they would be like when you have to find a pack of wolves, and the guy's like, did I say I was killed by a pack of wolves? No, it was a pack of wolves. Go find more wolves.
Yeah.
That was good, but in general, like, I just don't like it when, as much as I like time travel discussions in general, I'm not really big into, like, when I have to take a break from the narrative that I was just working on to go learn something that they could have just told me some other way in, like, a whole game arc. You know what I'm talking about?
Sure. I enjoyed it as a change of pace, just having a different location, some different mechanics, and they tended to be smaller levels because the old town is a little bit smaller than the new town, so they tended to be pretty fast. But I appreciated Dr. Laser. I don't know if you guys found Dr. Laser or interacted with him.
Yeah, I ran into him once or twice.
Yeah, he's an arch villain of one of the ghosts that you find, who's a superhero who's been cut in half with a laser. And he says, please, will you defeat Dr. Laser? He is this evil villain, but he's got a time travel device that will let him travel through time exactly twice. And if you try to catch him, he's going to get away from you. Please, try and stop him. And the first time you catch him, he's like, I'll go to the past. And then he jumps back in time. And then you see him in one of the flashbacks, just kind of hanging out. He's like, how did you get here? What? Ghost, how could you have possessed me in 2 different time periods? And then he jumps back to the future where you can get him a 3rd time. So I appreciated using the conceit that way. But I think the flashbacks just had some of the funnier moments. Like finding out how that skull came to be a skull instead of a full body was interesting. So what did you guys think of the kind of bureaucracy of death that was in this game? Because I feel like this is a recurring theme in media for some reason.
Sure.
You've got examples like Beetlejuice, Coco, Grim Fandango, all these different games that also have kind of this Tim Burton-y, Tim Schafer, like the Tim Burton, Tim Schafer overlap, and Dia de los Muertos as well. Like all those things get crossbred a whole lot.
It's big in anime too. Like if we want a deep cut Yu Yu Hakusho, that's like the whole setup.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah. So what do you think of, like, why does this keep recurring, and what do you think of the specific interpretation in Flipping Death?
Well, there's sort of the most straightforward answer is sort of like the wrist cutters narrative. Like, have you ever seen that movie?
No.
It's a pretty good movie. Shannon Sussman's in it, and I like her a lot. But the whole conceit is, if you kill yourself, you go to this afterlife that's basically just a shittier version of the real world. So the joke's on you, really. Like, you tried to escape this life, and you just ended up with a shittier version of the life you were trying to get out. So there's sort of the joke on that level that, like, all right, the afterlife's supposed to be either eternal bliss or eternal torment. Turns out it's just more of the same, basically.
Yeah, I think that I guess the most cynical reading is that capitalism has weeded its way into us to such a degree that we can't imagine a world without it, even in the afterlife. Like the trappings of our modern society, we can't even imagine a world where that's not applying.
Sure.
And so you end up with these visions of the afterlife that just are almost exactly the same as regular life, except slightly more paranormal.
I think there's a big level of just sort of inscrutability here too, right? Like if you put a bureaucracy to a high enough level, its overall functioning becomes just generally inscrutable. Like people know it's modular. Like people know what happens in their little area, but those pieces fit together in such a way that nobody really understands how everything operates in its entirety. So I think you could make the same argument about death, right? Death is sort of inscrutable, not in a similar way, but sort of in its own way, that nobody really knows how it operates, nobody knows how it works. So we take what's perhaps maybe one of the most inscrutable things we have, massive level bureaucracies, and apply to an equally inscrutable afterlife, right? Like, it's a question of decision making. Like, at a high enough level of bureaucracy, nobody knows how decisions get made. Similarly, when people die, nobody really knows how that decision gets made, right? Why do some people die and not others?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And in Flipping Death specifically, there's not that much bureaucracy. Death is clearly walking around kind of taking numbers, trying to solve these ghost problems so that they will move on to the afterlife.
Yeah, he's like an overworked HR director or something.
Yeah, basically. And he requested a temp I guess millennia before you show up. And he's just overworked and wants a vacation. And even in the afterlife, the benefits are bad.
Which begs the question is, like, who is Death requesting from?
This game does not want to answer that question.
Yeah, right. I guess this is like God, like Buddha. Like, I guess I don't want to get that far into it. Just another game we're consulting about religion.
Turns out it was Satan. They had it right. Go figure.
It was L. Ron Hubbard. He came and he just took over.
That was the one. Turns out that was the right afterlife. But yeah, I appreciated it. I think it grounded the game pretty nicely. And I think it added a little bit of humor to the whole situation.
There's also sort of like a death revisionism going on. Like one of the last few lines Penny says is, like, death isn't really that scary. People think of it as this force stalking them throughout their life, but really death's a pretty nice guy. I'm not really sure what the game's trying to say about death that isn't just like, oh, this is a logical extension of its sort of whimsical aesthetic.
Well, I think she's saying, as someone who had been death, that death is not stalking you, trying to kill you. He's just basically an overworked HR director who's trying to get people to just, damn it, show up. Just move on. Just go. What do I have to do to get you to leave? What kind of compensation package do I have to give you so that you will move on? And
right.
So she understands. Though we do have evidence of death just taking horrible, vindictive, destructive actions when accosted. Like the blacksmith that you meet was supposed to fix Death's scythe because I guess he bent it somehow. And when the blacksmith cannot do that successfully, he wraps her in chains and throws her to the bottom of a lake where she is trapped forever until Penny frees her. So I would say that Death is maybe not the best guy, but he is very put upon.
Yeah, but this isn't like it's not like a death be not proud situation where like there's a clear sort of moral that's trying to be conveyed. I think that's just that attitude toward death is just the logical extension of the sort of atmosphere the game tried to create, as opposed to the advancement of a specific moral.
Yeah, I agree. It's pretty much just the end point of the whimsy.
Yeah.
I just don't really pay that much attention to how games portray death. I mean, maybe I should, but the way it was portrayed here just like didn't really. I mean, I saw it no further beyond like this is a comedy trope that has been done before, and it's easy to write a story around this. It's not like a jab at the writers, but I don't really read into this one that much.
That's fair. And what did you guys think of the mind reading? Because this is the second or third game now that we've played where the internal lives of other characters is really centered. Though I guess you don't have to read anyone's minds. You get some extra information here and there from reading minds in this game, but most of the stuff comes from just quirking around.
Right. I mean, you'd miss most of the best stuff if you didn't, though.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean,
but I think compared to like Psychonauts,
I love mind reading elements of a game because I think that does kind of accurately present how there's this like dichotomy between, or maybe not dichotomy, but like a duality in all of us, that there's the stuff that we say openly in public, and then there's the stuff that we say in our brain. And I know that and probably I'm not the only person who would say this, I'm a pretty different person in public than I am in my mind, and lots of other people would feel that same way as well. And it's nice to have a game kind of nod at that. So I did like this aspect quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I liked it. They had the same sort of thing in Stick It to the Man, which is why I wanted to play this game. It was an element that really jumped out to me in the first game. But like Stick It to the Man, it was mostly these characters having really odd quirks, and so the things going on in their head were also generally pretty funny. But it's not giving you that much of a deeper understanding of these characters.
It's curious. It's curious how quickly most of them sort of adjust to this new eventuality. That like, oh, okay, sure, there's this other voice in my head. And they sort of rationalize it, right? Conscious. Like, a lot of them was like, oh, is this my conscious speaking? Or like, is this, I think somebody says CIA mind control, I'm sure, at some point.
Yeah,
but I think
there's a person who says CIA mind control. One person internalizes it as God.
Right. Yeah. Well,
God, you're finally talking to me.
You take over this old-timey preacher. But I think it's an interesting sort of commentary on maybe, not necessarily the subconscious, but I mean, a lot of stuff just sort of percolates in our brains that we have no idea where it really comes from. You know, like, I'm sure thoughts have popped in your head and you thought, oh, like, what's that? You know, like, not everything just comes up out of conscious control. So it's sort of an interesting question of like, all right, how separate are these aspects of our brains such that if it was, you know, Penny speaking to me in my mind, would I necessarily realize it? I guess if it were in a different voice, I would. But then, like, are our thoughts even in voices properly?
All of my internal monologue is in my Sean Connery accent.
I read somewhere once that you can't think in different volumes, and that's always bothered me.
What do you mean, like you
like
can't
your internal
think
monologue?
louder?
Yeah, your internal monologue can't start shouting. You can like imagine it shouting, but it'll still be in the same volume, so to speak.
Huh, interesting. I'm gonna like play with that and see if I can
take a look. Take a listen.
It's
always bothered me.
Deep listen.
Yeah, now it can bother you guys too.
So, Billy, you also had some questions about the value prospect of this game as well, right?
Yeah, if we want to jump right in there. So when I look at this game sort of at face value, I think this game throws back to a genre that is near and dear to my heart. Though I really wasn't a fan of point-and-click adventure games. I really didn't play games like Myst or Riven or anything along those lines when I was a kid. I did play a lot of the games from, like, the old school, like, late 90s, early 2000s, N64, PS2 era, games like Banjo-Kazooie, Jak and Daxter, Ratchet and Clank, games that had these, like, little one-off vignettes between these supporting characters and the protagonist to advance a greater plot. And I generally loved those games, and they were also very platformy. This game, for some reason, I didn't enjoy it as much. Like, I still thought the game was fun, and I got some good moments out of flipping death, but I didn't have as much fun with this game as I thought I would, based on what I knew about it going in. I had maybe a higher expectation, and then I didn't have as much fun as I thought I was going to. Now, just having fun or not having fun for me didn't change the value, but there were some things that I thought about this game that made me think about how much this experience might have been worth. So when I purchased it on Steam, it was worth it cost $19.99. It was a $20 game. Now, I certainly don't want to say that this game doesn't have value, but I'm thinking about other games that I could have bought for $20, and they might have had more to offer. Because this game, to me, was relatively short. You can probably beat it in 5 or 6 hours. And because of the way the game is built, like it's this very nature, it has very little replayability. There's not any kind of like multiplayer or co-op or DLC right now. And I don't think this game lends itself well to like a co-op environment or multiplayer environment, maybe. There could be DLC in the future with just more stories, more more parts of the game. But when I think about a game that's like $20 on Steam, I'm generally looking for a little bit more. And I'm not disappointed with how the game played. Sure, maybe I didn't like it as much from, like it wasn't quite as fun for me for some reasons, but that's not what's taking away value for me. But I'm kind of wishing that I had maybe some more to get out of the game.
Yeah. So I'm of a few different minds on this. So we could evaluate this value discussion in a couple of different ways. We can compare the $20 cost to other goods. We can compare it to other games. Or we could compare it to other just forms of entertainment specifically. If we compare it to all goods, it's, roughly maybe a lunch for two.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah, depends where you go. Sure.
In most places, depending on where you go, a lunch for two. It's roughly a movie, one movie.
Yeah.
And if you compare it to a movie, it is, 8 hours.
You're certainly getting more than a movie with popcorn. Yeah,
Right.
So
that's
that
always
definitely...
my default is, okay, what's the per hour cost?
Mm-hmm.
So if it's 8 hours, it's $2.50 an hour.
Yeah. So if you want that kind of comparison, that works out. But then against other games, we get into this odd space because game pricing right now is fucked.
It's so weird.
It's it's completely non-standard, and there's actively a race to the bottom happening at all times, especially on PC.
Can you expand on race to the bottom? Because I think I know what you mean, but like I just want to know a little bit better.
There's a 2 or 3 tiered system for how games are generally priced. There's the $60 big budget game, which will come out on a console. Most console games fit this description, or at least console games that come out on a disc fit this description. They ask $60. They have teams of sometimes hundreds of people, sometimes thousands of people working on them. They are your Assassin's Creeds, your Mass Effects, your Call of Duties. Those games are $60. They have lots of flash, generally online multiplayer, downloadable content, all these different features, and they ask a $60 price tag. And they do not budge, for the most part, from that price tag. You then have the kind of second tier, which is indie studios that have some kind of backing, like some cachet. Your Double Fines, your Zoinks, the company that made this game. You've got companies like Supergiant, this kind of second tier where they are making games of a quality, I would argue, that matches the $60 games. But because they are smaller teams and they are generally delivering things with less graphical fidelity or, a smaller feature set in like raw feature, like if you're just going to describe the number of things you can do in a game. And as a result, they generally charge a $20 to $15 to $20 price tag. But I don't know that has to be the case. It's largely because it seems like they have smaller teams and are trying to undercut the $60 games a little bit. And then you have everything else. Almost all the other games will come out at any price from like $1, $5, $10. And then
there are some games that are $0, and that's a whole tier in and of itself, like free to play.
Exactly. There's free to play, and then there is the Steam marketplace, where every single year, multiple times a year, there are sales. And once those sales come, once you've discounted your game, you can never charge full price. You will never get sales at full price again. You will never get a lot of sales at full price again once you start discounting. And this was actually an interesting discussion I listened to when I was at PAX East this year with Rami Ismail from Vlambeer Games. You might know Nuclear Throne. It's made by them. And one thing they do is they do not do discounts. They do not do Steam sales. They say our price point is our price point, and we're not budging from it. And the reason being that right now there's a tremendous incentive for developers to come out at a price point and then discount at a Steam sale. But like I said, once you make that discount, generally people now treat that discounted Steam sale price as the true price. And they will wait months, years, until that price comes down to low enough to where they will buy it. But your product hasn't changed. Nothing about it is different. Even your cost to sell it is not really different. It's just due to, time passing, you being willing to offer it at a lower price point just to get some return on that game. But once you start doing that, it starts undercutting other games. Like new games then have a hard time asking full price because people are buying older games that are on sale. And sometimes they're not even old. Sometimes they're even a few months old, and they're already discounted. So it makes, the price point you pick really a hard choice. And ultimately, there was another person on the panel, I forget his name, I'm sorry, that mentioned that they generally pick a number that is higher than they would ultimately think. They think of a price point, and then they add $5 to it because they know that anyone who is really excited by the game, who is not price sensitive, will buy it out the gate, and so that's great. They will get that extra money. But then that also gives them room to, have sales from, where they, instead of having a sale that, takes a $20 game and makes it a $10 game, if you start at $30 and make it $20, and you originally thought, hey, maybe this is a $20 game, then you're not taking that big of a loss. Like you were actually overpricing up front, and then the price that you are accepting to settle at is a more reasonable price.
I want to just jump in for a second because I have like a bit of a different insight here. So not from a video game perspective necessarily, but outside of the podcast, my 9-to-5 job, I run a business, and my business is an education service where people pay me a monthly fee to use my business's services. And every couple months, every maybe couple years, we have a restructuring of our pricing to account for us adding new programming or our team is growing, and our prices might change. Usually they go up, and people ask me almost on a daily basis, do you guys ever do discounts or sales? And I also say no. And I really confidently say no because I know what my service is worth, and I know how much my business and the service that we provide should be valued at. And you're right, Gino, that as soon as you flinch on the worth of your product or your service, that can never be undone. Right? Once you flinch, that can never be undone. So as a businessman, I have a monthly subscription, but then I also have like a sign-up fee for somebody who wants to join for the first time. I'll modify that. I'll do like a special to make it easier for someone to start, but like my monthly rates, I'll never change for somebody. So you're right. Like you can't really back off of your price because once you do, you're kind of sunk. You made a lot of good points, but I want to push back on this one topic. So as a gamer growing up, from I'd say the years like probably 2000 to 2010, that big decade of games, I was consistently like 5 to 8 years behind what was new, and that was a choice because I always wanted to buy games used or when the price had organically come down.
Sure.
This happens many, many years later. So I was making a choice. When PS3 and Xbox One come out, I'm still playing PS2 games for the first time, and I'm doing that because they're now 10 years old, and I want to, pay $20 less for a game. And as long as I keep myself in kind of a bubble, I'm not spoiled by what's going on in these games, I can get the same value, the same experience from that game, but just for a lower cost. So I think that you're right that games can't – or sorry, not can't, but I think you're right that games shouldn't be bullied into Steam sales, for example, but games should still have a model where like, all right, we're going to charge this for our game because people that are super excited about it on launch are going to get it, but know that like 3 years from now or 5 years from now, it'll be part of our plan to get a second surge of sales once we discount our game after X number of years, whatever makes the most sense. So I want that kind of stuff to still be in vogue, but again, I don't want developers to feel bullied like they have to offer Steam sales to get their numbers up.
Yeah, but so one of the issues with the sale model is that the original reason for a sale was not just to goose how many items you're selling. It was because ultimately an object would be taking up shelf space. It would be taking up inventory space in a physical store. There was a cost incurred of having that object in your store. You wanted to get it the fuck out of your store. But in a world where things are being sold digitally, there is actually no cost to hosting the game, or very little cost.
It's certainly so different. It's certainly different. It's not the same as inventory space on the shelf. You're right.
It's really marginal. Like the cost of making a game of like literally making a copy of a game for a digital download is so marginal that there's really no downside from the seller's perspective to having that game being at full price forever. And also, there's not this relationship where you've got this, like the old way that something would be sold would be you'd have a wholesaler who's selling it to a retailer, and then that retailer is selling it at a markup to another person. So there's kind of this intermediary in the middle who's trying to make a profit off of it. In the case of Steam and most digital distributors, the middleman in this case is Steam, and Steam is taking its cut regardless. It doesn't actually care how much of a profit. It's going to get its percent. And it's just such a large economy of scale that it doesn't need to set your price. It lets you set the price, and it's happy to take its 30% or 40%, however much it's taking from you. So it's really down to the publisher or, the person who's kind of in the role of the wholesaler to set the price. And when you have these sales, it changes, like you said, the value of the game. It changes the perception of what this game is worth. And once you start having this kind of becoming endemic and you're racing literally to free-to-play, like you're starting to compete with games that don't cost anything, it becomes very hard for anyone to turn a profit and become a reliable business. And it just leads to a bunch of studios just being constantly in a precarious location where you're one bad game away from failing. Instead of
bankruptcy.
One game, exactly. Like if you sell, you can have successful game after successful game. The one that doesn't hit, you're bankrupt and you're done. And it just puts people on this treadmill of always having to churn out a game because the old games that you sold did not sell enough to give you a cushion. And also if you discount them, then it means that even your future games, the perception of their value will be impacted as well. It's this race to the bottom that hurts everyone. And right now there's no one, there are very few companies that are pushing against it. And so I think Flipping Death is worth $20. I personally, got my money's worth out of it. But I completely understand because games like Cuphead, I think, was Cuphead 20, 30, 10? I don't even know anymore. I think it went on sale. But, you can get games like No Man's Sky, which has a ton of gameplay, and I know that game's been in some controversies, but there's a lot of game there. Like, there's all sorts of games that you can get at very, very cheap rates at this point. You can get Psychonauts for $1.
Yeah, this returns to if we're looking at, my measurement of choice is cost per hour. So Flipping Death runs into this issue where, Flipping Death has a lot of sort of atmosphere, let's say. I'll just use that as an amorphous term to sort of capture, character, setting, music, what have you, right? But atmosphere doesn't necessarily increase my hours and so decrease my cost per hours. What it does, it might make those hours more enjoyable, but it doesn't give me any more of them. So effectively, the game's charging me more for something that's not increasing, like you said, Gino, the gameplay. So you have to thereby charge more, but then I'm paying more per hour. So the question at that point is, where does the value come from in a game? It can't just be a sheer number of, I can play this for X hours. But ultimately, it seems mostly to boil down to gameplay.
I agree. And it's an odd, pernicious issue that the industry has kind of let itself into. And I hope we find a way out of it. But for a new game that clearly had a lot of love and a lot of effort into it, it was a fairly small team, but I think the production values for a fairly small team like this game is solid.
Yeah.
It's well made. I did have a game-breaking bug for a little bit, but that happens. I did a sequence break by accident.
I think that I'm gonna step back a little bit and maybe come off of Flipping Death, because I think Flipping Death can definitely make a justifiable argument as a $20 game, and I think anyone who's listening to this podcast should not hesitate to pick up Flipping Death. They're going to have fun, especially if they like this genre, if they like the adventure, puzzle-solving, point-and-click adventure kind of game with well-written characters and great dialogue and great art style, great music. There was a lot of things that were valuable here. I think, in retrospect, kind of being honest with myself, I'm probably just a self-made victim of me having high expectations, but I didn't have as much just fun. So I left myself wanting more, and I can be a little bit honest maybe with that.
I think that's fair. Like, having high expectations and having it not quite meet them. It happens.
Because when I looked up Flipping Death before I played it, I saw, oh, this art style looks sweet. Oh, it's got a cool jazzy soundtrack. Oh, there's lots of like little character vignettes, and it's all about. I mean, like there was so many things that made me think, oh, is this going to be like an old school game with like a new twist? And it kind of was, but I just didn't have. I don't know why, but like I just didn't have as much fun with this one. And that's probably why I was thinking in my mind, like, was this really worth it for me? And it probably wasn't for me, but I bet it will be for lots of other people.
Sure. So any last thoughts on Flipping Death?
Yeah, Roll, this is something that I just said Flipping Death had so many redeeming qualities, and now I'm going to say some bad things about it. I was confused by how it did its saves, like its saving. I didn't ever find like a manual save option. I'm pretty sure this is just like an auto save game, but I had a hard time figuring out like when it was safe to turn off the game, because I lost some progress here and there, and it wasn't a lot. It was only like maybe 5 minutes of playtime, 5 or 10 minutes of playtime. But there were some things that I lost progress on, and I was like, wait, that's kind of weird. Why did it choose this spot as like the autosave spot? So that was a bit wonky. Also, some of the controls were really bad, and one of the most painful parts of the game was when I was trying to get Junkyard Jenny or whatever her name was.
She was great.
She's a great character, but when I had to like push her unconscious self in like the doctor's gurney or whatever you want to call it, I had such a hard time doing that. And in retrospect, Pokeman probably would have been an all-star in that scenario.
That's how I moved her.
Pokeman probably would have been a champ there, but I used the tennis racket guy because he's got like a shovel. I can just kind of scoop her up, and I did, but it worked okay.
I tried that. Then I found Pokeman.
Oof, it was rough. It was rough, man.
Give me a hero.
Yeah, Pokeman wanted to be a super villain. He was the all-time champ, I bet, in that sequence.
I need a hero.
And his name was Pokeman.
Yep, I need a hero in the morning night.
Also, the jump in this game felt gross. As far as platformers go, the jump kind of felt real gross. It just was not a clean jump. I kind of come from a long history of platformers, and I've dealt with a lot of clean jumps and a lot of sticky, gross jumps. If you ever played Thomas Was Alone, probably one of the cleanest, crispest jumps, and probably too responsive, almost responsive to a fault in Thomas Was Alone because it was so precise. Thinking games like classic Mario games, Banjo-Kazooie, Jak and Daxter, Ratchet and Clank games, very nice jump mechanics for the platforming. This one was kind of a sticky jump. It didn't feel good.
Yeah, there were times when I felt like I could make a jump, but it turns out that just because of the wonkiness of the floaty jumps, I actually could not. I was not supposed to be able to make the jump, but there was enough play to the jump that I thought maybe if I just, came at it at the right angle, I'd be fine. Anytime they tried to use the physics as a key part, like moving the gurney, or when you need to whack a bowling ball into one of the windows, anytime you needed to do timing or precise jumping, this game kind of
stumbled,
slowed down. Yeah. And when you're on the death side of things, you can teleport to your scythe.
Mm-hmm.
And I found that to be a little finicky as well. But the way I got around it was instead of kind of throwing my scythe and then letting it land and teleporting to it, I would throw my scythe out and then immediately teleport, and you gained a lot of momentum that way.
Mm-hmm. It worked.
That allowed you to do super jumps and stuff.
It worked kind of like in Ori and the Blind Forest. You could kind of like super jump on objects and enemies. You could kind of like super jump off your scythe.
Yeah. That was my number one way of navigating,
mm-hmm.
pretty much. This game would probably be a cool speedrun game.
Yeah, I was thinking about that. I don't even know how it could be a speedrun game. I mean, I'm sure someone might route it out just for funsies, but this game might have speedrun potential if people can learn to manipulate the AI in the mortal world in really weird ways. Like I bet if someone picked this game apart from a speedrun perspective and said like, well, let's see how much we can like break and make like the AI in the mortal realm so bonkers gonzo busted that we can skip entire segments of the game, then it might be a really cool speedrun game. But until something really cool and like gonzo broken like manipulation can be found, I don't know how much speedrun potential this game has.
Well, I know that I broke the scripting at least once, and at least at one point I entered into a state where when I stopped possessing someone, I was attacked by an invisible enemy who would constantly hit me and cause me to lose spirits. And entering into those states seems like they could be exploitable.
Was that in Chapter 5?
I think so.
So like there was like forum posts about that. People thought that the game was like broken. I didn't look into it that much, but like you weren't the only one that experienced that. It was like some kind of like invisible. People said that there was some kind of like invisible monster just like hitting them all the time, and they could never hold on to their like spirits that they could use to possess people, so they were kind of stuck.
Yeah, I almost got stuck. So it seems like there might be enough give to some of the scripting that you could find some interesting ways to get around things.
Speedrunners break games in all sorts of ways. They're nuts. I don't even know how they do it.
Time.
I guess you just mash your face into a game for long enough until one thing breaks, either you or the game, and it's usually going to be the game if the speedrunner's tenacious.
Look, if the Ohio River can create the Grand Canyon, we can figure out how to throw this scythe in such a way that we can cut a second off the game.
And both will be equally majestic achievements.
Oh, yeah.
Exactly. So with that, I think Flipping Death has given us all it can. For next episode, it's going to be Castlevania Symphony of the Night, a long-time request of the show.
And we are specifically calling out one of our long-time listeners to finally come on the show.
First time. Yep. So, Granimal, if you're not a coward, you'll play Castlevania Symphony of the Night and then join us on this podcast.
If you're not afraid to square up on a game with us,
you won't.
You won't do it.
All right. Thank you, Billy.
Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. I wish I enjoyed Flipping Death a little more, but that doesn't mean you won't, so definitely give it a shot if you like the genre. I look forward to playing Symphony of the Night because I'm always down to play a Metroidvania game, and one that is specifically a Castlevania game of the Metroidvania genre. Thank you, Pete.
Always a pleasure, guys. I would like to say Deep Listens does not condone fighting zoo animals, so none of our listeners should take this as a chance to.
Peter!
But
though,
if you
let
have
me
votes,
just say, if you have to, win.
Yeah. If you fall into the Lions cage, put up a fight.
I don't always fight zoo animals, but when I do, I win.
Damn right.
So, till next time, thanks for listening. Peace!